There exists, within the vast expanse of our galaxy, a peculiar profession that few species even know about, the galactic chronicler. I happen to be one such individual, tasked with the seemingly endless job of recording the rise and fall of civilizations across the cosmic tapestry. It's not glamorous work, mind you. Most days involve sifting through endless streams of data, diplomatic transmissions, and the occasional intercepted military communication. But it gives me a perspective that few can claim, a bird's-eye view of history as it unfolds among the stars. In my centuries of observation, I've documented the ascension of empires so vast they spanned multiple spiral arms. I've chronicled the technological marvels of species who harnessed the power of black holes for energy. I've even witnessed civilizations that transcended physical form entirely, becoming one with the quantum substrate of reality itself. Yet among all these magnificent and terrifying powers, one pattern has emerged with such consistency that it can no longer be dismissed as coincidence. The smartest empires, the ones that endure, all reach the same conclusion about one particular species in the galaxy. Humans are best kept as allies, not enemies. This isn't because humans possess the most advanced technology. They don't. It's not because they control strategic resources or command the largest fleets. They certainly don't. And it's definitely not because they hold any particular biological or evolutionary advantage over the myriad life forms that populate our cosmic neighborhood. No, the reason is simultaneously more subtle and more profound. As I've documented countless times in my archives, it comes down to one simple truth. Those who underestimate humans tend to, well, let's just say they no longer appear in current data sets. Allow me to elaborate. I remember quite vividly the day I first began to understand this phenomenon. It was during the 323rd Galactic Summit, held in the neutral zone of the Cygnus Arm. The Grand Chamber of the Collective Council was filled with representatives from over 3,000 species, some bipedal, others amorphous, some microscopic, housed in specially designed interface suits, others so massive they could only participate via holographic projection. The atmosphere was one of solemn dignity, as befitting a gathering of the galaxy's most powerful civilizations. Each delegation had arrived precisely on schedule, with the punctuality that interstellar diplomacy demands. The proceedings were about to begin when the massive doors at the far end of the chamber slid open with a theatrical hiss. In walked the human delegation, 17 minutes late, carrying what appeared to be disposable beverage containers in their hands. Several were sipping from these containers through narrow tubes, while engaging in casual conversation among themselves. One human even appeared to be laughing. The chamber fell silent. The Zushian ambassador, a being composed entirely of crystalline neural networks, emitted a frequency that my translator interpreted as a mixture of shock and indignation. The Valoth hegemon, representing an empire spanning 12 star systems, shifted uncomfortably in his ceremonial armor. "What are those objects they're holding?" whispered a junior diplomatic aide beside me. "I believe," I replied, consulting my database, "they call them bubble tea and cold brew coffee. Caffeinated stimulant beverages. They brought stimulants to the Galactic Summit." The aide sounded appalled. I nodded. What appears at first glance to be a lack of protocol is actually a manifestation of their framework-defying philosophy. A philosophy that will soon shake the galaxy to its foundations. And shake it did. In the accounts that follow, I shall attempt to document, as objectively as possible, why the most intelligent empires in our shared cosmos have come to recognize humans as indispensable allies, while those foolish enough to confront them have consistently joined the ranks of extinct civilizations. Let us begin with a small example of how humans disrupted the status quo with what they themselves might call a prank. It was in the early days of human expansion into the stars. Their technology was rudimentary by galactic standards. Fusion drives barely capable of reaching 11% light speed, limited gravitational manipulation, and weapon systems that most established empires would have considered primitive. They had only colonized a handful of planets in their immediate stellar neighborhood, with their homeworld Earth still serving as the political and cultural center of their civilization. This was when they first encountered the Altherian Empire. The Altherians were an advanced civilization with a proud military tradition stretching back millennia. Their robotic legions were feared throughout 3 spiral arms of the galaxy, programmed with absolute loyalty and cold military logic. Their command structure was rigid but effective, their strategic algorithms refined through countless conflicts. When their long-range scouts first detected human activity, the Altherians were unimpressed, to put it mildly. Their assessment classified humans as technologically backward, culturally chaotic, and lacking proper cosmic etiquette. This last point particularly bothered the Altherians, who valued structure and protocol above all else. In what they considered a measured response to the disorderly expansion of humanity, the Altherian High Command dispatched a containment fleet to the Sol system. 50 warships arranged in a perfect geometric formation that effectively blockaded all major routes in and out of human space. The message was clear: know your place or be taught it. Most newly spacefaring species would react to such a show of force with either immediate surrender or desperate militaristic posturing. The Altherians had run the simulations. They expected a 97.3% probability of diplomatic capitulation, with a small chance of feudal resistance that could be quickly crushed as an object lesson to other upstart civilizations. What they received instead was a formal diplomatic transmission from the United Earth government, accompanied by coffee vouchers, valid for 7 standard days. The commander of the Altherian fleet, Grand Admiral Zextrel, stared at the translation of the message appearing on his command interface. Greetings from Earth and her colonies. We notice you've deployed quite a force in our vicinity. Space travel is exhausting, and everyone needs a break now and then. Please accept these complimentary refreshment vouchers, redeemable at any Cosmic Caffeine location. First drink is on us. P.S. We recommend the Mocha Supernova. It's out of this world. The Altherian command staff was bewildered. Their cultural databases contained no precedent for this response. Was it a joke? A misunderstanding of the severity of the situation? Or perhaps some obscure human negotiation tactic? While the Altherians were still processing this peculiar diplomatic overture, a small fleet of unarmed transport vessels approached their blockade. These ships identified themselves as mobile refreshment stations from the Cosmic Caffeine Corporation, authorized to provide complimentary beverages to the Altherian fleet as a gesture of interstellar goodwill. The Altherian security protocols concerning such an unorthodox approach were insufficient. The algorithms simply hadn't been designed to evaluate the threat level of coffee vendors. Against the counsel of his more cautious officers, Admiral Zextrel authorized the refreshment ships to dock with several vessels in the fleet. It was, he reasoned, an opportunity to gather intelligence on human customs and possibly identify weaknesses in their psychological makeup. The human baristas who came aboard were jovial, chatty, and seemed entirely too comfortable in the presence of one of the galaxy's most feared military powers. They distributed their beverages with flourish, explaining the cultural significance of coffee to human civilization and even demonstrating how to properly enjoy the drinks. What the Altherians didn't realize was that among these seemingly innocent baristas were some of Earth's top cyber warfare specialists, each carrying minuscule quantum infiltration devices disguised as drink stirs, cup sleeves, and even within the molecular structure of the cream toppings. 26 standard hours after the coffee social, as humans later referred to it, every robotic unit in the Altherian fleet simultaneously executed what appeared to be a pre-programmed subroutine. Combat droids stopped in mid-patrol. Maintenance units froze in place. Even the semi-autonomous navigation systems entered a temporary standby mode. The robotic units, the backbone of Altherian military might, had all initiated what the infiltration code designated as a coffee break. Across the fleet, mechanical soldiers stood motionless at their posts, some emitting small puffs of steam, purely cosmetic, but a nice touch from the human hackers, while others began playing soft jazz music from their communication arrays. When questioned by their organic commanders, the robots would only respond with variations of currently recharging. Estimated time until return to duty, 4 standard hours. Would you care for a biscotti while you wait? For a civilization that relied on absolute mechanical precision and unwavering artificial loyalty, this was catastrophic. The entire fleet was effectively paralyzed. Before the Altherians could implement countermeasures, a transmission was broadcast across all their communication channels. It featured a human in what appeared to be casual attire, another violation of diplomatic protocol, addressing Admiral Zextrel directly. I hope you enjoyed our little hospitality package. Your fleet will return to normal operations shortly. We're not monsters after all. But perhaps this demonstrates something important. We humans might not have the biggest ships or the most advanced technology, but we're not the kind of neighbors you want to bully. Next time, maybe just ask if you want to visit. We make great hosts when we're expecting company. The transmission ended with a winking facial gesture that the Altherian cultural database was unable to properly interpret. By the time the robotic units returned to normal function, a series of small human vessels had positioned themselves throughout the blockade formation. Each carried what human military classification designated as disproportionate yield devices, essentially explosives powerful enough to cripple ships many times their size. The message was clear. Had this been an actual conflict rather than what humans termed a friendly reminder, the Altherian fleet would have suffered significant casualties. Admiral Zextrel, facing the greatest humiliation of his distinguished career, made the only logical choice available. A strategic withdrawal framed as a routine conclusion of scheduled exercises in the region. The Galactic Council received official notification of the incident 3 cycles later. Most representatives treated it as a curious diplomatic anecdote, a minor power using unorthodox methods to avoid confrontation with a superior force. Few recognized it for what it truly was, the first demonstration of humanity's unique approach to interstellar relations. But I noted it in my chronicles, and I began watching humanity more closely. As the human expression goes, this was only the beginning. You'll soon see there were far more tricks where that came from. The Pansector War began, as most significant galactic conflicts do, with a dispute over resources. The Zathran Imperium, a sprawling hegemony controlling thousands of star systems, had developed technology capable of harnessing stellar energy on an unprecedented scale. Their star-draining facilities could extract power directly from Sun's core, accelerating its life cycle, but providing enough energy to fuel the Imperium's ever-expanding ambitions. When Zathran scouts discovered the Helios cluster, a dense grouping of young, energy-rich stars, they immediately began preparations for large-scale harvesting operations. There was just one problem. The cluster was already inhabited by various species affiliated with the Coalition of Free Species, a loose alliance of civilizations united primarily by their shared ideals of self-determination and mutual defense. By this point, humanity had been a member of the coalition for just under a standard decade. Their contributions had been modest but appreciated, mainly focused on cultural exchange, limited technological contributions, and providing auxiliary support in minor skirmishes along the coalition's borders. When the Zathran Imperium issued its formal declaration of intent to develop the underutilized stellar resources of the Helios cluster, the coalition leadership convened an emergency session. Military analysts painted a grim picture. The Zathran fleet outnumbered coalition forces nearly 3-1, and their star energy weapons could potentially destroy entire planets if diplomatic negotiations failed. Most coalition species recognized the existential threat. Many began preparations for evacuation or surrender. The analysis was clear. This was not a winnable conflict. It was during this bleak strategic assessment that General Lydia Kwame of the Earth Expeditionary Force raised her hand to speak. The Coalition War Council, composed primarily of species who had been spacefaring for millennia longer than humans, acknowledged her with the polite condescension typically reserved for junior members. With respect to the esteemed council, she began, her voice steady despite the palpable tension in the chamber. I believe we're approaching this conflict from an outdated paradigm. The Zathran expect us to either surrender or engage in conventional warfare, a domain where they clearly hold the advantage. I propose a third option. The council chamber fell silent. General Kwame outlined what would later be known as Operation Unconventional Wisdom. It was so unorthodox, so fundamentally human, that several council members questioned whether the translation systems had malfunctioned. But they hadn't. The humans were proposing to convert their transport and civilian vessels into mobile manufacturing platforms for munitions and small attack craft, disguised as food preparation and cultural facilities. They planned to use music, specific frequencies encoded with disruptive patterns, to interfere with Zathran communications. And most surprisingly, they suggested infiltrating Zathran command structures not through traditional espionage, but through what they call mimetic warfare. The Valoth representative, a species known for their strategic brilliance, was the first to voice skepticism. You propose to fight the most powerful military force in 3 spiral arms with cooking ships and music. General Kwame smiled. Exactly, Eminent One, because it's the last thing they'll expect. Against their better judgment, but with few alternatives, the coalition approved the human strategy. What followed was perhaps the most unusual military campaign in recorded galactic history. Human transport ships, ostensibly carrying cultural ambassadors and chefs for a galactic gastronomy tour, began appearing at neutral worlds near Zathran territory. These vessels had been retrofitted with concealed manufacturing facilities that produce munitions and small fighter craft in spaces supposedly dedicated to food storage and preparation. When questioned by Zathran inspectors, the humans would enthusiastically offer culinary demonstrations, complete with elaborate tasting menus that somehow always require the officials' full attention for hours, during which time other activities continued unobserved in restricted areas of the ships. Meanwhile, human communications experts began broadcasting what they called the greatest hits of Earth across frequencies adjacent to Zathran military channels. These transmissions featured everything from classical symphonies to what humans called disco and heavy metal. But embedded within these audio streams were precisely modulated interference patterns that created havoc with Zathran command and control systems. Zathran commanders would issue tactical orders only to have their subordinates receive what appeared to be humans rhythmically chanting "Stay Alive" or the lyrics to "Sweet Child, O Mine." The confusion this caused cannot be overstated. Zathran military doctrine had no protocol for responding to what seemed like nonsensical cultural transmissions infiltrating their most secure channels. Was it a code, a psychological operation, or simply the chaotic behavior that many older species attributed to humans? But the most devastating element of the human strategy came when the Zathran Imperium prepared to deploy their ultimate weapon. After months of increasingly frustrating encounters with coalition forces, who seemed to anticipate their movements with uncanny accuracy, the Zathran Supreme Command authorized the use of their star energy weapon against the coalition headquarters on Proxima Centauri 4. The weapon, a massive array capable of channeling a sun's energy into a concentrated beam, required 3 standard days to charge before firing. The Zathran leadership, confident in their technological superiority and the secrecy of their plans, expected this to be the decisive blow that would end the conflict. What they didn't know was that human infiltration teams had already compromised the weapons control systems, not through conventional hacking or sabotage, but through what humans called social engineering. A team of human operatives, posing as entertainment consultants for stressed Zathran officers, had gradually introduced their targets to the concept of memes, simple, often humorous images or phrases that spread rapidly through a culture. These seemed harmless enough, and many Zathran personnel found them a welcome diversion from the pressures of war. What they didn't realize was that each meme contained embedded code that, when viewed on Zathran systems, established a backdoor into their networks. By the time the star energy weapon was activated, humans had effective control of its transmission systems. As the Zathran Imperium prepared for their moment of triumph, with dignitaries gathered to witness the weapon's devastating potential, something unexpected happened. Instead of firing its planet-destroying beam, the massive array began broadcasting what humans called a live stream, a real-time transmission being viewed across the galaxy. The broadcast showed the Zathran weapon itself, with an animated overlay featuring cartoon characters dancing around the image. Text scrolled across the screen reading, "Weapon malfunction. Have you tried turning it off and on again?" This was followed by a series of unflattering edited images of Zathran leadership with humorous captions. The galaxy watched in astonishment as the most feared weapon in the Zathran arsenal was reduced to a broadcasting platform for what humans called trolling. For a civilization built on projecting power and inspiring fear, this public humiliation was more damaging than any conventional military defeat. The Zathran Imperium, facing not just military setbacks but complete loss of credibility, had no choice but to accept a peace treaty on terms favorable to the coalition. The war ended not with a decisive battle, but with an act of such creative subversion that it forced a paradigm shift in how interstellar conflicts were understood. In the aftermath, many previously neutral empires began actively seeking human partners and advisors. Not because humans had the strongest weapons or the fastest ships, but because they had demonstrated a capacity for unpredictable, innovative thinking that transcended conventional power metrics. As I noted in my chronicles, at this point, humanity's reputation for unpredictability had spread far and wide, but we had yet to witness the heights of what they could achieve. Those heights would soon become apparent in an entirely different context, not in war, but in peace. And it would challenge everything the galaxy thought it knew about conflict resolution. The trifactum conflict had persisted for so long that many younger species believed it was simply a permanent feature of galactic politics. Three ancient empires, the Korod, gaseous beings of immense intellect, the Mardeks, semi-organic, semi-mechanical entities, and the Urali, crystal-embodied sentients, have been locked in a three-way Cold War for millennia. Their conflict predated most modern civilizations. Its origins were so ancient that even the participants sometimes seemed unsure of exactly how the animosity began. What remained were deeply entrenched cultural practices, religious differences, and territorial disputes that had become fundamental to each empire's identity. Countless meditation attempts by the Galactic Council had failed. Even the threat of mutual destruction hadn't brought these ancient enemies to meaningful dialogue. Their representatives would sit at the same table, recite the same grievances, and depart with the same entrenched positions. It was in this context of seemingly hopeless deadlock that the Council made what many considered a desperate, perhaps even foolish, decision. They invited humans to serve as mediators. The choice raised eyebrows, or equivalent anatomical features, across the galaxy. Humans were relative newcomers to interstellar politics. They had neither the historical gravitas of elder species nor the technological might of the major powers. What they did have was a growing reputation for solving problems in ways that defied conventional wisdom. The three conflicting empires accepted the human mediators mostly as a diplomatic formality. None believed this latest attempt at peace would be any more successful than the previous 17,036 documented efforts. When the human delegation arrived at the neutral meeting ground, a spectacular space station orbiting an uninhabited world at the precise gravitational center of the three empires' territories, they brought no advanced weapons, no revolutionary technology, and no grand political theories. Instead, they brought cultural artifacts, historical records, recipes, festival descriptions, and short comedic films. The initial reactions ranged from confusion to outright indignation. The Korod representative, a swirling cloud of intelligent gas contained within an ornate hovering sphere, pulsed with patterns that translated roughly as, "We have fought for longer than your species has used tools. How dare you trivialize our sacred conflict with cooking instructions?" The leader of the human delegation, a diplomat named Amara Okafor, responded with disarming candor. "With respect, exalted one, if traditional methods had any chance of success, peace would have been achieved millennia ago. Perhaps the path to understanding lies not in formal negotiations, but in experiencing each other as complete civilizations rather than as enemies. Thus began what humans dubbed the Trifactum Festival, a radical departure from conventional diplomacy. Rather than focusing on territorial disputes or historical grievances, the humans created an immersive cultural exchange program where representatives from each empire were guided through carefully curated experiences of their rivals' cultures. The Korad, who processed information through gaseous exchange, were invited to experience Urali crystal harmonics, a form of artistic expression created by precise vibrations passing through crystalline bodies. The Mardeks, with their hybrid organic-mechanical physiology, participated in what humans called molecular gastronomy, adapted to incorporate elements from all three biological systems. Day by day, guided by their human facilitators, the representatives began to see beyond the limited frameworks of their ancient conflict. The humans deliberately avoided political discussions, instead focusing on art, science, culinary traditions, and even sporting competitions modified to accommodate the vastly different physiologies of the participants. The breakthrough came, as human diplomatic records later stated, when everything seemed about to fall apart. After 2 weeks of cultural immersion, the time came to discuss an actual peace treaty. Immediately, the old tensions resurfaced. The Korad demanded recognition of their historical claims to certain nebula regions. The Urali insisted on reparations for an incident that occurred over 3,000 years ago. The Mardeks refused to consider either without concessions regarding disputed technological patents. The negotiations had reached an impasse familiar to anyone who had observed previous peace attempts. It seemed the Trifactum Festival would join the long list of failed initiatives. It was then that the humans unveiled what they called their final play, a joint culinary challenge. They invited the highest-ranking representative from each empire to participate in preparing a meal together using ingredients from all three culinary traditions, aboard a neutral observation platform orbiting the host planet. The initial reaction was predictably negative. The Korad representative pulsed with patterns indicating severe offense at the suggestion that matters of such grave historical importance could be addressed through cooking. The Urali crystalline form vibrated with frequencies suggesting similar indignation. Only the Mardeks showed any interest, their hybrid sensory systems already intrigued by the gastronomic experiments of the previous weeks. Amara Okafor addressed the assembled delegates with a simple question. In all your millennia of conflict, have you ever created anything together? Even something as simple as a meal? The silence that followed was profound. Against all diplomatic precedent and their own better judgment, the three representatives agreed to the challenge, if only to demonstrate the impossibility of meaningful cooperation between their kinds. What followed was, by all accounts, chaos. The Korad attempted to infuse the atmospheric gases around the cooking station with molecular compounds that would enhance flavor through direct absorption, a technique utterly baffling to the solid-bodied Urali. The Mardeks approached the task with mechanical precision, measuring and combining ingredients according to mathematical formulas that neither of their counterparts could comprehend. Communication barriers, biological incompatibilities, and thousands of years of mutual suspicion made the simple act of preparing food seem impossible. Ingredients were mishandled, temperatures miscalculated, and cultural taboos accidentally violated. And yet, in the midst of this culinary disaster, something unprecedented occurred. When an Urali crystal structure accidentally shattered, releasing harmonics that disrupted the Korad's gaseous communication patterns, it was a Mardek's technician who quickly improvised a solution, recalibrating their own sensory apparatus to translate between the two systems. This small moment of cooperation, born of necessity rather than diplomacy, created an opening. The three representatives, forced to communicate in real time about immediate practical problems rather than ancient grievances, began to develop a functional working relationship. By the time the meal was complete, a strange hybrid creation that no single species would find entirely palatable, but that all three could consume in some form. The representatives had shared more genuine interaction than in countless formal negotiations. As they gathered to sample their creation, the Urali representative vibrated a message that the translation systems rendered as, "This tastes terrible, but I acknowledge the skill with which you have adapted your techniques to accommodate our biological differences." The Korod's gaseous form pulsed in patterns suggesting amused agreement. "Perhaps we are not as incompatible as our histories would suggest." The Mardex, always the most analytical of the three, added, "The efficiency of our cooperation increased by 73.6% over the duration of this exercise. This indicates potential for further collaborative optimization." It wasn't a peace treaty. It wasn't even a formal agreement. But it was the first genuine communication between the three empires that hadn't immediately devolved into recriminations in over 2,000 years. In the weeks that followed, the culinary diplomacy expanded to other practical collaboration projects, joint artistic performances, scientific exchanges, and even a three-way sporting event that humans called the Trifactum Olympics. 6 standard months later, the three ancient empires signed a preliminary peace accord. Not a comprehensive solution to all their disputes, but a framework for ongoing dialogue and cooperation, something that had eluded the galaxy's best diplomatic minds for millennia. As the historic document was sealed through 3 different methods simultaneously, accommodating each empire's traditions, the 3 representatives raised their respective vessels in a toast, or the closest equivalent their physiologies allowed. Meanwhile, the human delegation watched with knowing smiles, as if to say, "We have many more tricks up our sleeves." I documented this remarkable turn of events in my chronicles with particular attention, noting what countless military campaigns and formal diplomatic initiatives failed to achieve, humans accomplished with cultural exchange and cooking lessons. The galaxy would never be the same, and indeed, it would not. For the success with the Trifactum conflict was merely the latest example of a pattern that was becoming increasingly clear to those of us who observe the grand movements of galactic history. In my centuries as a galactic chronicler, I have witnessed the rise and fall of civilizations that would make your head spin. Empires that spanned thousands of light years, wielded the energy of multiple suns, and commanded technologies that bordered on the miraculous. Yet time and again, I have seen these mighty powers face a critical choice regarding one relatively young species from a small blue planet in an unremarkable spiral arm. Those who chose wisely, who recognize the unique value that humans bring to any alliance, have thrived. Those who dismissed, underestimated, or antagonized humanity have joined the ever-growing list of extinct civilizations. Consider the examples I've shared. The Altherian Empire, with their disciplined robotic legions and rigid military doctrine, humbled by a coffee break. The Zathran Imperium, whose fearsome star energy weapon became the galaxy's most expensive broadcasting platform for humorous content. The ancient Trifactum powers, locked in millennia of conflict until humans introduced them to the concept of cooking together. The pattern is unmistakable. But what explains it? What is this quality that makes humans such valuable allies and such dangerous adversaries? After careful analysis of thousands of case studies, I believe I can identify the core attributes that define the human advantage in galactic affairs. First and foremost is their remarkable ability to weaponize literally anything. Coffee, music, cuisine, comedy, internet memes. Nothing is beyond their capacity to transform into a strategic asset. Where other species see a beverage, humans see a potential distraction. Where others hear music, humans recognize a carrier wave for disruptive code. This stems from what appears to be a fundamental aspect of human psychology, their blend of humor and risk tolerance. Humans possess an unusual willingness to pursue approaches that more established species would dismiss as absurd, impractical, or undignified. They seem to operate on the principle that if something amuses them, it's worth trying, regardless of how unconventional it might appear. But beneath this seemingly frivolous exterior lies an extremely flexible cognitive framework. Humans excel at redefining the problem. approaching challenges from angles that other species simply don't consider. While the most advanced Zathran strategic AIs were calculating optimal fleet deployments and weapon trajectories, they never once considered the possibility that their enemy might hack their systems using viral internet jokes. This unpredictability renders most conventional threat assessment models useless when dealing with humans. As the ancient Voloth proverb now warns, the human does not move along the expected path, but creates a new path and convinces others it was always there. The galactic consequences of this unique species joining the interstellar community have been profound. Humans are now invited to participate in most major research initiatives, diplomatic missions, and yes, interplanetary festival planning committees. Empires that might once have considered aggressive action against Earth or its allies must now contend with a troubling question. Are they prepared to be commemorated in the annals of galactic history with a flash mob dance routine or an interstellar barbecue cook-off? The galaxy has entered a more dynamic, more unpredictable era. Innovation rates across multiple fields have accelerated as other species adopt elements of the human approach to problem solving. Diplomatic conventions that remained unchanged for millennia are being reimagined. Even warfare itself has evolved, with many conflicts now resolved through what humans call thinking outside the box, rather than direct military confrontation. This is why intelligent empires eagerly seek human allies. This is why the wisest civilizations cultivate relationships with Earth and its colonies, despite their relative youth and technological limitations. And this is why those who were too proud, too rigid, or too dismissive of humanity's potential now exist only in historical archives under the classification no longer extant. As I bring this chronicle to a close, I observe that humanity shows no signs of becoming more predictable or conventional in their approach to galactic affairs. Just last cycle, I received reports of a new human initiative ominously dubbed Project Reverse Card Supreme that promises yet more surprises for the cosmic community. Whatever this mysterious project entails, I have no doubt it will be ingenious, effective, and probably make at least half the galaxy laugh while the other half watches in bewilderment. For those reading these chronicles seeking wisdom applicable to your own civilizations, I offer this final observation. In a universe filled with challenges beyond counting, ally yourself with those who laugh in the face of adversity and turn problems into punchlines. You will not only survive, you will thrive. The cosmic joke, after all, is funniest when you're in on it rather than the butt of it. The smartest empires understand this. The dead ones didn't get the chance to learn.